Welcome to the HBCU podcast. You're listening to episode 45. If you're an avid listener or just joining us for the first time, here we're joined by some awesome HBCU grads in the form of co-host and guest. We also focus on all the great things HBCU alumni are doing all over the world. On this episode, we speak with Cris Laniese. She's a graduate of Bethune Cookman University. Cris is a professional artist and creative director of Artpocalypse Atlanta. She's shown at exhibitions throughout the country, and her work can be found in galleries in Atlanta, New York, and Jacksonville. During this episode, we discuss her HBCU experience, her passion for art and the artist, and her mission to bring more awareness and visibility to Black art. Keep listening. It's the HBCU podcast.
I'm Cris Laniese, 2011 graduate of the great Bethune Cookman University.
Thanks again for joining me because I have followed you on Instagram, I guess inadvertently following your work as well. So I'm glad we finally get a chance to chit-chat.
I am so excited because I am huge on HBCUs and I've been listening to you all's podcast for a while. You guys had one of my classmates on there and I fell in love with the podcast and I think I've put just about everybody that I know on it too.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So when I told my family, I was like, yeah, I got an interview with the HBCU podcast. They was like, oh my God.
Well, I'm so glad you continue to spread the word. So you're the second Bethune Cookman Wildcat on the podcast. So you and Zav are classmates?
Yeah, actually, Zav graduated a couple years before I did. I'm pretty sure he's class of 2009.
Okay.
But we were in student government together. We were in student government together for about 2 years. And then I just know him from being a part of different organizations. And he's just a light. And he's always been a light. And he's just a really good spirit and a good vibe. So when I saw he did his interview, I was like, oh my gosh, let me check out this podcast. And you guys are like one of the only ones that are consistent. So I put everybody else on and we all fell in love with it.
Oh, well, thanks. I definitely wanted to speak to you because we haven't had anyone on the podcast like yourself who is an artist, and we'll talk a lot about that. But first, we're going to jump right into your HBCU experience so we can get everything we need to know about how you loved your HBCUs. So first off, just tell us where you're from, and prior to you even getting to Bethune Cookman, what was young Cris like?
So I am from Jacksonville, Florida, and if you know anyone from Jacksonville, I'm just like them. I'm very proud of my city. Prior to school and everything like that, I attended the High School of the Arts in Jacksonville, and my focus was creative writing and theater. And at that school, you had to audition to get in. There wasn't a lot of Black students there. We had a few Black teachers, but I might have had 6 Black teachers there. And out of them, maybe 4 of them went to Bethune Cookman. So when it was time for me to kind of look at colleges, I wasn't too crazy about going to college because I wasn't too sure if I wanted to pursue myself as a writer or really where I wanted to go. I think the same thing all kids think at that time. I think we think that probably throughout our entire lives, actually. And the few Black teachers that I had was like, you really need to go to Bethune Cookman. Like, it's a family. It's like a family, like you feel like you're at home.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be totally different than what you've been experiencing in Jacksonville. They're like, it's a lot of history. I've always been very Afrocentric. I've always been infatuated with the Black Panthers, and they were just like, this is where you need to be, because I wasn't as sure about where I wanted to go. It's not like I was a bad student. I didn't feel that excitement that everyone else felt about going to college at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually listened to them, and they brought in a representative. This is how Cookman people are, though. Like, they brought in a representative for the few Black kids that we had in our graduating class, and they paid out of pocket all of our application fees if we wanted to apply.
Oh, nice.
And I got in, I got a scholarship, and my best friend and I both decided at the same time, because at first she was thinking about going to FAM, and then Cookman came and they talked to us, and we were like, I think this is more of our fit. And she was like, you want to do it? I was like, yeah, let's do it. And that's how we picked it. And it was the best decision, one of the best decisions of my life.
Nice. So you and your best friend went to college together the whole 4 years?
The whole 4 years, roommates in the dorm, roommates. When we moved out on campus, we pledged together. We did all that. Like, and I think that's probably what made it even cooler, because it was my best friend that I got to go through everything with.
Yeah, I can attest. Me and my best friend went from high school, well, from childhood. We've been friends since 3rd grade, and we ended up going to Claflin together. And same thing, roommates. But I initially didn't know she was coming. Neither did she. She didn't choose to right away. Tommy, she's actually the co-host of the HBCU podcast. I met people when I first got there, and I think she came like days later, and I was like, okay.
Oh,
well,
my God.
Right. So
Right.
Bye the rest of you. I know her. So bye.
Yes. That's how it is. It's like, everyone was like, are you guys sure that's a good idea? But it was the best idea. And everyone from probably high school and college, when they refer to us as Cris and Jen. Like, it's just like an automatic one. Like, Cris and Jess, Cris and Jess, Cris and Jess. And we're still like super tight. Like, nothing has ever changed. So it was cool going through all those experiences together. Like, very appreciative.
So when you got to Bethune Cookman, how much did you really know about the university prior to attending? And what did you really like come to know, I guess, about the history once you finally got there that really made you say?
Okay, so when I got to Cookman, I mean, being in Florida, you learn about Mary McLeod Bethune vaguely during Black History Month, because, you know, how relevant she is to Black culture and everything. So I knew who Mary McLeod Bethune was. And luckily with my family, I had a little bit more knowledge than other people.
Mm-hmm.
So honestly, coming into it, I'm already thinking like, you know, like I've been in a different world. Like, this is my time. Like, I'm like, you know, I already know these things, but I'm sure all HBCUs do this. We have to take a freshman seminar course where you really learn the history of the university. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Bethune is actually buried on campus, and her house is on campus, and her house is a national landmark, and it's left just the way, you know, she left it. It has like her outfit out, her last outfit out. It has like a letter to Eleanor Roosevelt on her desk, and it has all these things. And I never really even paid attention to that prior to. So when I was in my freshman seminar class, every day, because, you know, y'all know what it's like when you go to a HBCU, and not all HBCUs, especially when I went, everybody wasn't on the renovation development.
Right.
So, you know, at first you're like, whoa, hold on. Wait a second. Like, I think I'm giving y'all a nice little coin real quick. Like, I think I deserve a little bit more. But when you realize, like, our general studies building was the first African-American hospital in Florida, and how Dr. Bethune went about even opening it. Like, she was tired of driving all the way down to Miami if one of her students were sick. The land that our school sits on was actually a trash lot, and that's why she was able to buy it for $1.50. Mm-hmm. And she cleared it herself. Our White Hall, that's like, you know, the building that sits in the middle of the campus. One of the first stories you learn at Cookman is that the KKKs, they burnt down White Hall one time, and then they came back to burn it down again. And at the time, the school was only an all-girls school, and the girls used to stay in White Hall. So, you know, Dr. Bethune did like a school shutdown and told the girls to stay in their rooms, and they had their candles lit. And they literally sung hymns the whole time as the KKKs were making their way to campus. And Dr. Bethune went out there on her own and stood in front of her hall and said, you'll have to burn me down before you burn down my school. And they left. And, you know, you find out that Zora Neale Hurston was teaching at Bethune Cookman, but her and Dr. Bethune kind of got into it because Cookman is also a United Methodist school. And mm-hmm. if you know Sister Zora Neale Hurston, she ain't getting down with all those rules. So it's like, the history you learn at Cookman is beyond, I mean, it's literally breathtaking. Like, when you sit there in your freshman orientation, they're like, you're on sacred ground. You really are on sacred ground. Like, there were a lot of the first things that's ever happened here. A lot of presidents came here to meet with your founder. Dr. Bethune is she is the only female founder, African-American female founder of an HBCU.
Yeah.
Like, he's beyond, so when you realize like what you're sitting in, what you're doing at this time, and Cookman does a really good job of, you have like a lot of professors there or people who work for the university who attended the university when Dr. Bethune was still the president.
Oh, wow.
And they tell you about how in chapel, I know it's so good. There's a lady there named Miss Marianne Smith. And, well, at least when I was there, she was still there. And she'll tell you about how on Sundays you'll go to chapel and Dr. Bethune will say, tell me a jewel. And a jewel is just something that is either a scripture or an affirmation or something of positive. And she'll call on random students to tell you a jewel. And when you sit with Dr. Smith, she makes you say those things like, tell me a jewel. And it's just like habits and tradition that make you feel really, really rich at Cookman. And another thing I loved about Cookman was Cookman is United Methodist. So there were a lot of rules, freshman year, but I think because the university was private, like Cookman really, we prayed before everything. We prayed before and at the end of everything. It was such a family vibe. Like you really felt like family. Like it's the moment you walk in there, it was so warming. Like, even people who leave your school freshman year and they're still claiming Cookman to this day. Like they're like, Bethune Cookman class, hey, hold on, buddy, you didn't graduate. Like you left us. Like, but it was such a family vibe. So besides the dorm, my freshman year, I knew I was sold on Cookman. The only thing that I was like kind of against was the dorms. But besides that, I was 100% sold on Cookman. Like I just knew that that's where I needed to be. I felt like I was being a part of Black history. And then I had the opportunity and I was blessed to experience President Obama getting to office while I was at Cookman. So that was a moment in its own because him and Michelle came to Cookman right before, those elections even happened. So I just felt like you really feel like you're a part of that history and a part of, I feel like as African Americans, that's what we always yearning for, is to feel like we have this connection to our history because we were stripped of so much. And it made me feel whole. Oh, at least at the time, it made me feel whole and it made me get a better understanding of what I felt like my purpose was.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it's great when you have students and alumni who can really recite and tell you the history of their college, of their school, and the things that really did stick with them while they were there. And it sounds like you know so much about Cookman, as all of us should, about our alma mater. So that's really awesome. One of the things that you mentioned, and I think is also really relevant to history, is that a lot of people get the same reaction you do when you come to an HBCU campus, especially with the dorms and with the buildings. But what they don't realize is its history. And then they don't realize it's not just history to that school, to that state, but to America. So many of our college campuses and the buildings on those campuses are like on the National Registry of Historic Places because they're so rich with history. So I think that's always something people should keep in mind when you visit HBCU campuses and you see them and you're thrown, or maybe they don't match the aesthetic of the rest of the campus. Just, keep in mind that, learn a little bit more about them because maybe some really awesome and amazing things happen there. So you as a student, so with you being an artist, and I'm assuming that is particularly like what you consider your career, correct?
Definitely.
And Cookman's a liberal arts college, and we have a few liberal arts colleges, but I read that you said you're a self-taught artist. So when you went into Cookman, how did you come about choosing your major? Was it particularly art? How did all of that come about for you?
It's kind of crazy because when I was in high school, I was a creative writer. Like I've always been the type of person who dabbles in all arts. If you let me tell it, I can sing. Everyone else might not agree, but I think I can sing a little bit. I think I can hold a note or something. Like, I think I can sing.
Come on, no.
And I'm quick with the words. And, so in high school, I was really focused on being a writer. And I was really passionate about it. But then I lost my passion for writing, probably towards like my senior year. So I think that's why I was kind of confused about what I wanted to do. when I decided that I was going to go to school, you know, this is just how I operate. I'm like, I'm going to switch it all up. Like, I'm going to really focus on being an intellectual instead of being a creative, you know, because the creative thing is just draining. So my concentration, I graduated with a bachelor's in international affairs, and I wanted to be a diplomat. It's so random. But I really did. And if you speak to anyone from Cookman during that time, I was in student government, Model United Nations, Poli-Sci Club, IS Club. Like, you know, everyone from Cookman just knew I was going to be this next politician. So I was secretly, though, still writing. I've always been one to sketch, always been one to draw a little bit on the side, you know. I was still doing that for my own pastime, but while I was in school, I was strictly, let me save the world. I want to go to third world countries. Let me wear my business suit on Mondays and Wednesdays. You see me with my student government badge. Like, you know, I knew my Robert's Rules of Order. I was beyond, like,
Yes.
But around my junior year, I had an internship. And I realized that the way policies are written and everything like that, like, my heart just isn't, I just knew that wasn't my calling on how I was meant to affect the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I was already in my junior year. Here I am, like, a student leader. And I kind of was like, oh man, like, I don't have, you know, I'm not, how can I say this? I felt like, not like I was a fraud, but as if I was just very confused. Like, I'm going to finish school in a year and definitely not do what I thought I wanted to do this whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Not knowing that all my other peers are going through the same thing, you know, like, most of us are going through the same thing. But in school, for some reason, you know, you think like, yeah, I've been doing this for 3 years. And it's just like, you know, it's really intense. So when I graduated, I knew that I wasn't going to study, I wasn't going to study any politics. So I started working like a corporate America job. I actually worked in the mortgage business of Merrill Lynch, like in the mortgage sector. It's so random. I really got like real corporate, and I was depressed. I was beyond depressed. I was it took like 6 months, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. Like, and I tried to write, and writing wasn't coming back as easily. And my husband was like, hey, like, I was at Michael's, maybe you should try to paint. Like, and I was like, no, I've never really painted. He's like, you should paint. You always doodling. And I painted something that night, and I just put on Instagram like, hey, like, I'm just so glad I got this out of my system. And people were like, hey, I want to buy this. I want to buy this.
Oh.
And I was like, what? And that's literally how it started.
Oh, wow.
That's literally how it started. Right. I was like, oh, okay. And, you know, and that's really how, and then I battled the thought too, like, all these people who know me as Cris that's supposed to be this politician that's going to change the world. And here I am painting. Like, this just wasn't a part of it.
But that just goes to show, like, as a person, you can be multi-passionate. You can have several skill sets, several things that you're really good at, talented in, and you're always evolving. And that really showcases that. And I think your story is really great to share, because I've met so many people when I was in school and just in doing this podcast that say, hey, I just knew this is what I was doing when I went through the gates of whatever university, and to come out and the game changed. So I think it's good that people hear that that's something that's common. Sometimes you just really are gung-ho about what you're doing, and, you know, you get to experience some things and life changes.
Yeah, I appreciate it, because I think sometimes, like, you know, we think in our minds while we're in school, like, we've figured it out, or we've taken the first step in figuring it out.
Mm-hmm.
And really, we're just training our mind. We're just becoming very developed on one subject. But your mind is endless. And sometimes we limit ourselves when we do that to ourselves, you know, because we think other people have this expectation of who they think we're meant to be. And how can someone else think who you're meant to be before you figure out who you are?
What was it about art that has kept you here and to continue working in the craft or the industry. I'm not sure which one works best for that.
I think they kind of fit. I think they're kind of like, they kind of tie into each other. Art was one of those things when I painted, because I felt so, going through that stage, I just felt like I was in a fishbowl. And when I painted that painting, the first one, I just felt such a relief. Like, it was like a legit high. Like, I was like, whew, like, I am back. I consider myself a fine artist. I'm a fine artist whose concentration has been in urban mosaic art, from what I've been told from my past series. But I've dabbled in various mediums: graphic design, illustration, charcoal. And I know I mentioned to you earlier, like, I did an interview with this other podcast, and the guy was like, yeah, portrait artist Cris Laniese. And I was like, I'm not really a portrait artist. And he was like, I think you are. You've been doing nothing but portraits. And I was like, oh, maybe I am a portrait artist right now. And as an artist, though, if you're intrigued by something, never be afraid to tap into different mediums and try them out. You know, if you look at your favorite artists, they don't just stay in one medium. They have different series where they try out different things, and all these things just develop your art style. Mm-hmm. So as you grow in your craft, then you can, you know, become a master of those different things. But I do consider myself a fine artist first, then a curator, then a creative director.
Okay. Awesome. So because you do have all these types of styles just under your belt, and you kind of pick and choose when you're going to create something from those particular areas, I'm sure you've accumulated quite a bit of work. So with that work, I see that you have some of it in galleries in Atlanta. You've done major exhibitions in Atlanta, in New York, in Jacksonville. So with all of that said, what exactly goes into creating an art show, or being a part of an art show, from the artist standpoint as well as from the creative director standpoint?
So from the artist standpoint, if you're in a group exhibition, it's really pretty easy. Like, you should just deliver on the artwork. And I tell all artists, because with Artpocalypse, we deal directly with a lot of artists. I tell all artists it is so important for you to have your paperwork together, for you to have your copyright information together, for you to really understand the business behind art. Because oftentimes buyers and stuff will come to group exhibitions, especially from smaller artists at the time, and they might buy a piece of art because they see something in it. And let's say they buy your painting for $500, and then 7 years later, boom, they can resell that painting for $50,000 or $25,000 or whatever it may be. And if your paperwork's not in order, you don't get any of that once it's being resold. It's happened to a lot of African American artists, especially out here. Mm-hmm. So that's one of my main things, is just telling artists, like, hey, there's a great chance that your art is going to sell at our shows, because that's what we focus ourselves on. Make sure on your end you have everything together. So group exhibitions are pretty easy. If you're an artist doing a solo exhibition, it is literally like having a child. It is like one of the most stressful experiences of your life. Like, you are creating all this art for a long time, all this art that's themed, and this is the art that you're saying to yourself, like, yeah, this is what I want to put out here by myself. Then you're creating, like, you're curating with your curator and your creative designer, you know, the ambiance of your show. Like, what's the point of your show? What's correlating everything? You're marketing the show. You have to bring in the masses by yourself. Uh-huh. Whew, the pressure. Like, and then at the same time, you're not really taking commission work because you're so busy trying to create some of your best work for the show. Mm-hmm. So doing a solo show is so stressful. Like, everyone's like, when's your next solo show? I'm like, I don't know, like, because I don't want to do it. But that gets a little stressful. Being a creative director of a show is beyond. I enjoy actually the process of it, because I'm crazy like that. But I enjoy holding the artist submissions. I enjoy sitting down with my team, talking about what we want from this show. Mm-hmm. I enjoy going through all the artist submissions. I enjoy picking the pieces from the artist. I enjoy finding the venues. I enjoy coming up with the artist statements, creating the flyers.
All the details.
Making sure that all the details. I am a detail-oriented person to the T. If you ask my business partners, they're like, Cris is detail crazy. Like, I'm the type of person where if all the other frames for the signs are gold, don't bring me a silver or a black frame, because I'm going to tell you I need a gold frame. Like, so as the creative director, I love being on the back end in the cut and really watching me put everything together and watching the flow of the room and having artists. Another thing as a creative director, too, I want to put this in, is, you know, right now in Atlanta, art shows are hot. Like, this is a trendy thing. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of aggravating because sometimes you go to an art show, there's no lighting. It's like, it's dark like a club. What type of, you know,
right,
whatever. And then a lot of artists are getting schemed from these art shows because they got to pay a certain amount to be a part of the art show. And mm-hmm. it's just a trend, you know. But with Artpocalypse, since we are artists as well, one thing we really, really focus on is making sure that our buyers list, our gallery owners list, our influencers within the art community list holds on its own. Like, our artists sell at our shows. That's one of my biggest goals, is to let artists know that you can display your work and you can make a living off of your work as long as the right eye see it. It's very easy to pack out a show if you're popular or if you have friends, you know, people support you. Mm-hmm. But to really make your artistry grow, you have to be seen amongst your artist community and not just your Instagram following community, which is often confused in our field, you know. So that's another thing, like, I really, really pride myself on. As a creative director, you have to constantly have a hand on the scene of the art community mm-hmm. to know who's who, what to push to what, you know. And I'm intrigued by that by itself. Like, creative directing is probably the most stressful of them all. You know, it takes us we can knock out a show in a month, but we plan out our calendar at the beginning of the year, and it takes us at least 3 months towards each show to get everything detailed. And as long as the artists do their part, the day of the show, it usually, besides a couple hiccups, you know, it usually all goes into each other. But on the outside looking in, I've had people tell me this all the time. Like, they're like, it's just art. You just put the art on the walls, right? And you're like, no.
It's so much more.
It's so much more. What are you talking about? Like, you know, and just really constantly training your mind to just become better at eyeing a room, setting a room, how to hang art so when people walk the room, that your paintings tell the story that you want them to tell in the room as well. So yeah, it's a lot. It's actually a whole lot on the back end.
I can believe it. Tell us about Artpocalypse Atlanta, how it came about, how it came to be, and exactly, you know, what it is and how we can follow the organization, the business, the movement. I'm not sure which, but you will let us know that.
It's all of the above, actually. So Artpocalypse is a creative group focused on visual artists. And I actually am not one of the founders of Artpocalypse. My business partner, Art by Reed, he actually started it. He's a very popular urban anime artist in the city. And he threw one show and asked me to be a featured artist. And I was. And then he threw another show and he saw like what I did with my solo show. He's like, hey, I really think you'll be dope as an event coordinator. And I think you should learn the back end of things. And I was like, okay, I think it'll be dope. Like, let's try it out. And then I literally moved from event coordinator because I was going to all these different shows, like I said before, in these different exhibits and seeing how things were going. And just, I'm the type of person, if I'm going to do it, I got to become a master in it.
Yeah.
And I went from event coordinator to creative director in like 6 months. And then literally maybe 3 months from being creative director, Reed, who had the idea, the vision of the organization, and Malcolm, who's the business operations owner, they both came to me and was like, we want you to be a part owner and we want to make it official. Like, because what you bring to the team is just what we've been missing, and let's put it all out there. Nice. So we did all the paperwork and everything like that. And we throw exhibitions in the city. We throw artist talk. We do artist development classes. You know, we really just started to give artists this platform. It's like how FUBU was, like, for us, by us. As artists, we are strictly for the artist. Like, our motto is love the art, pay the artist. Like, we're strictly for teaching artists that you can make a livelihood out of this if you do it right. And one thing about Artpocalypse is we usually throw a show every other month.
Mm-hmm.
You can find us on Instagram at Artpocalypse Atlanta. And we throw a lot of little artist talk. We do a lot of collabs with people. Like we have a couple collabs with like Fulton County schools, a couple different classrooms that we work with.
Nice.
It's literally only 3 of us as owners, and we've had visions for Artpocalypse way before. But this past year, we've just really taken off in a way that none of us expected us to take off this quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes it is overwhelming because everything we make from Artpocalypse literally goes right back into Artpocalypse.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we literally just fund the art. We don't take any commissions off of our artist sales. If anyone contacts us and like, hey, I'm looking for a portrait artist to do this and this, like we have a Rolodex of artists. We align artists up to kind of be put into museums. Like people are like, are you guys going to do Artpocalypse management? All these things are things we've talked about. Right now, we're just trying to finish our calendar. Like, we're just trying to get through the calendar, like, set our calendar. But the growth of Artpocalypse, the creative group, is phenomenal. And the love that we're getting back from Atlanta is phenomenal. And we're actually doing Art Basel in Miami this year.
Oh, nice.
I think we're going to be the only art group from Atlanta that has our own venue there for 4 days. So we've been really, really, really working hard on that and trying to give artists from Atlanta that's never experienced that,
mm-hmm.
who we know have the talent, put them in front of those people. And every meeting, like when we sit down, we're like, we got to push these artists as if we're trying to push ourselves, because I don't know if I'm the next big thing. I'm cool with not being the next big thing, but I do know that we will be working with the next big thing, or whoever the next big thing is, they're going to say like, hey, Artpocalypse looked out for me before anyone else did. And that's just our end goal. Like, it's never competition with us. It's
mm-hmm.
everyone. Like my partner Reed is like, everyone eats. Like everyone eats. Like it's never competition, because we really just genuinely love the art. And we see a lot of artists kind of, you know, since it's so trendy right now and people are just so eager to be seen,
mm-hmm.
they're sometimes not taking the best experiences for themselves. And that's what we're focused on. So
you're helping kind of navigate them a little bit.
We're just trying to help them navigate, like give them that education that they need. Because a lot of the stuff we've had to learn on our own, trial and error.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 of the owners are literal full-time artists. So we get the grind. Like, we fully get the grind, and sometimes you just need to hear it and see it from someone in the flesh that you can feel relatable to understand, like, this is what it is. And I love Artpocalypse though, and if y'all ever can come out to a show, y'all definitely should. Our shows are like no other. We have one coming up August 23rd, and it's our top 8 show. And we threw a competition earlier in the year where we decided we were gonna give out a full free solo art show. Everything. Marketing, videographers, the planning, the venue, prints, merch. We're paying for it all. The artist keeps everything.
Oh, wow.
They literally keep everything. We're creating the list. We got the buyer's list. And when my business partner brought it to me, the idea, I remember telling him, like, you've lost your mind. Like, we have Art Basel. Like, when he said it, he was like, he called me at like 6 o'clock in the morning. He was like, Cris, we need to throw a solo art show. I was like, Reed, we're throwing your solo art show in May. Like, I know. Like, he's like, no, we need to do one for an artist and full out the same way we do it. And when I told him, I was like, this is a $4,000 project that we're not getting any money back if we're really setting it up the way we want to. And he was like, yeah, but we need to do it. And so we held an artist submission for it. Mm-hmm. We had over 800 submissions.
Oh, wow.
It took us so long to go through those submissions.
And we narrowed it down.
It took us, we were shocked at how many submissions were coming through. Like when we first did it, and like the first day, you're on Instagram, and he's like, yeah, man, that post is doing numbers. Like, and then like you got to turn off your email notifications because
it's getting real.
It's too much. Like, it's like, so it took us a while to go through the submissions, and we actually were able to pick this winner. But that top 8 that took us 2 weeks to narrow down the top 8. because it was such a tough top 8. So we're having the top 8 show of the top 8 artists that held in that competition.
Oh wow, that's
Honestly,
neat.
Yeah, and we're gonna do it the same way. Like, we're fully putting it on. We're renting out a bigger venue so they can hang up more pieces. We're gonna do artist statements for them. We're gonna host the artist talk. They still keep full commission on their pieces. You know, I'm gonna set the room, do their interviews, put their wall vinyl up. You know, and we're gonna do a top 8 show. I personally think it might be one of the hottest group exhibition shows of the year in Atlanta because of the artists that we have. Like, we had artists submit from all over the world. We had a girl from South Africa that was in the top 8 who is trying to make it here. And if she's not, she told us she's going to send us her art. And, you know, as Artpocalypse, in our mind, we're like, we got to send her here. We have to get her here. But it's just, you know, I'm excited about it. I think it's definitely a show worth going to. And our shows are a little different. We actually theme them, and we try to have different themes for shows. So I think the fall calendar is going to surprise a lot of people, and then we'll end the year in Miami. And then in January, we actually have the winter show. Dustin, we actually have his solo show, which is called Worlds Apart. And that's it for a minute. I'm gonna at least need a month break after that.
That's awesome. I definitely will put it on my calendar to come check it out. You told us a lot about Artpocalypse, and it sounds super dope. But one of the things that really stood out to me was your artist development piece. And I think that's important because I think sometimes with art, people, and I can say that I've been one of the people, sometimes you see it as artistry and that's it. And the real thing is that it is a business, and there are some things that you need to learn about it. And so you mentioned commissions, you mentioned copywriting, and all of that type of stuff. Is that something that you guys also do through Artpocalypse to further develop the artist as well?
We will sit down and do consultations with the artist. You know, if we see like an artist is really serious about it and they just kind of want some direction, we'll sit down and do a free consultation with them about where to go about. Unfortunately, right now with our schedules, and since it is only 3 of us, we haven't really had the time to really sit down with the artist and set up their paperwork and do it for them. We would like to be able to get to that point. But we'll give you the full outline, you know, like we'll tell you, hey, this is how I get this done, and this done. Right now, trending in a lot of Black art is cartoon art, cartoon inspired art, where you'll see like Bart Simpson turned into Cameron, or, you know, things like that. And a lot of people think so-and-so's still in so-and-so's style, and really you're still in the original artist's style to begin with. So a lot of artists, those are fun paintings to create, but you can't really make any real longevity money off of that because that's not your original design anyway.
You're sampling.
And those are just things that, yeah, it's sampling. But surprisingly enough, people, they're shocked when we tell them this. It makes perfect sense to them when you say it, but they're flabbergasted. Like, they're like, what? It's like, yeah, like people are like, oh man, you stole my Susie design. It's like, you stole, no, you borrowed Susie.
Right.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so those are like small things that we're doing. I know in November, we are holding a artist workshop, and, you know, that's where we're going to sit down. We'll have our lawyer come in, because we do have a lawyer that we work with, and we'll have them discuss everything and have like artists, you know, take notes, ask questions, legal questions. We would like to host those more. I think it will come when we get a gallery space of our own, hopefully 2020. This year just kind of came so quickly, you know, that it kind of took us back. But if any artists are out there and they have any questions about it, please feel free to reach out to us or reach out to me personally, because I would love to help you. It seems very discouraging when you're looking it up on your own and you're like, is this copywritten? Should I trademark this? Like, what am I even looking for? But once someone sits down with you and breaks it down, it's definitely worth the time.
Nice. Well, that's awesome. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I think just much like all other types of industries, there's always more and more that you can learn about them. And it's really cool that you guys will be at least thinking about doing more artist workshops and giving people a chance to know the business behind it all as well. So that's cool.
Right.
I'm glad you also mentioned earlier in our conversation trending and things being trendy. And of course, art and artists have always been like a major part of culture in general, and Black culture, of course, in film, in television, in music, etc. But and as I'm talking to you, I'm really like thinking about She's Gotta Have It, and how recently, you know, the main character, she's an artist, and all these types of things. But how do you feel that it has been depicted, and what are some of the misconceptions about being an artist?
So a huge misconception about being an artist right now is that, and I think this is in any creative realm, is that you don't have a real job. Another huge deception that I think your family and friends kind of do subconsciously is think that you're going to do something for them for free, which is, you have no problem with doing it. But the amount of people I know that's like, ooh, can you draw me No, I can't. Like,
right, this is my work.
Like, I have things to do, you know. That's a huge misconception with it as well. Another misconception, and I think a lot of artists will probably feel this, but this is, I try to tell people not to be so judgmental about this, is that with trends and with the internet and social media and how quick everything is, and paint and sips, for instance, like paint and sips. Everybody loves paint and sips. They're super cute. And sometimes you go to a paint and sip and you might be inspired and you decide to go home and paint. And some artists feel like people are taking advantage of that, and they're using, you know, honestly, it's just a craft and a hobby, but people are allowed to do that, you know, and they're allowed to post it. But sometimes you're just hypersensitive as an artist. I think another thing is stencil art right now, which is a huge debate amongst artists, because there's a lot of stencil artwork out there where people are, if you go to Photoshop, you can really stencil art a couple of these like little black and white images, and whether you consider it art or whether you don't consider it art, whether you see the creativity in it or not. I do think right now we're in an era where you could turn yourself into an artist easily, you know, without even having to have the creative effort towards it. And I think that alone is what makes people not respect it as much. You know, when I tell people I'm a visual artist, like, people are like, oh, you know, I'll go to a dinner or something and, you know, they talk to my friends. What do you do? What do you do? They're like, what do you do? I'm like, oh, I'm a visual artist. They're like, you're a teacher? No, I'm a visual artist. Like, no, that's what and then you have to kind of tell them some accomplishments you've made before they're like, oh, you are a visual artist. You know, it's really about just like owning it, unfortunately. But that's really what it is. It's like, and you have to say it with confidence yourself. Like, hey, I am a visual artist. So I think, but that can you paint me for free thing? Ooh, that's probably like, if you look up art memes, that's probably the biggest one. Like, oh, can you draw me? Like, no, I can't.
Right.
So, yeah, those are probably the biggest ones I can think of right now. And then you get the whole, people don't want to discuss certain things with you because they think that you're so right wing or left wing that because of your art might make a statement, that they think that you're like so extreme in your belief that they kind of hold back of saying what they really feel to you, because they might see an initial piece. Like, did you see the second season of She's Gotta Have It?
Yes.
Okay. And then towards the end, there's that whole, whether people think that her piece was acceptable or not, and you want to stand out as an individual. It's like, that's a big misconception right there. People think that they have to accept your art. They don't have to. Right. I'm making my art for myself, you know, like, but it was a big, you know, I felt that. I was like, ooh, I feel this to a T, because people, you know, like they feel like they, you know, art is something that you have to please them by. If I want to make money, then yes. But if I'm just creating it for it to be shown because I have the voice to do it, And no, not at all. I make my art for what I want my statement to be.
So, art in HBCUs. I wanted to ask you why we don't see that more so as a conversation. And especially because most of the artists or HBCUs in general, regardless if they had an art major, they kind of were our first galleries. They were the only places that, African Americans could have their work seen. And what before it was received by the masses. So speaking to you, like I said, you're the first artist that I've had on the podcast, but why do you believe, or what do you think about HBCUs or a lot of artists not actually being from that particular space when it comes to art? And then also why we don't see that major in most of our HBCUs like we used to, because even music and the arts in general is a major or a discipline that has been fading over time.
I think and this is just my personal opinion, because this might kind of trigger a few people, because I want to say that first. I've had this conversation with, some of my fellow Wildcats, and we get all sensitive, but I think that HBCUs, because of how they were created and how they were set, like, for instance, at Cookman, the motto is enter to learn, depart to serve. And I think a lot of these HBCUs are trying, and for our legacy, are teaching you to be so much more. You could be a doctor, you could be a lawyer, you could be this. You have to put something back into initially, like something concrete, back into the next generation, so we can build this intellectual property within our community. And I think that the arts are often overlooked as intellectual property and kind of just looked at creative stimulation. Besides music to a T, because we love our bands, but even with our bands, like, we get some of the best Black musicians, and they might have symphony band in the spring or concert band, whatever they call it, in the spring, but the concentration is primarily just on marching instead of it being on classical and things of that sort, where they can literally expand their horizons in their craft. Like, I have a friend who went to a very big school, high school in Atlanta, played in the band there, got a full ride to an HBCU, played in his band his full ride, came back, was a band director, but he just wanted more. And he is now getting he's getting his doctorate in being like a trombone, like whatever it is, like just strictly for trombone. But he was just saying, like, wow, I've been so great at my instrument my entire life, being in most Black demographics, by playing certain things, and now I'm playing these other things. And even though I've played them here and there and I've been good at them, it's like, this is the first time, like, even on the outside, they're trying my expertise. Like, I'm being pushed to that limit. And it's because I don't think we take it as seriously as we take other things, because we don't see them as serious of careers. In the Black community, I know my parents are all about, hey, we want you to go to college so you can get a good job. That was that generation. You don't go to college to be an artist. Like, you go to college to get a good job, So I think that's why they don't really concentrate on it that much. And it is ironic, because a lot of HBCUs are liberal arts schools.
I wonder sometimes with that, is it because there's not much value placed on it, even with a public education? Like, you see the arts being taken out of all of, it seems like, for the most part, all of the public schools. So it eventually trickles down to the colleges, because there's no one being educated in grade school about it. So how are they to go to college and have an interest in it as well?
It's just so weird to me, because it's like, it's being taken out of the schools because it's not looked at as, like, gaining this intellectual property. But we all know that the creators have the biggest influence.
Yeah, studies have shown. It's
very ironic. Yeah, it's just very ironic, because once you are great, you're great. Like, once you are Langston Hughes and Maya Angelou, and once you are these people, it's, until you reach that certain level of success, it's as if it's it's as if it doesn't exist. You know, just even thinking about it, it's like, wow, like, you know, Cookman has like a little gallery, a kind of sort of gallery, but the art's never changed. They've never changed the art.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, yeah, we got to do better. Like, you know, and then now I'm thinking to myself, even as an alum, like, I'm like, hey, I need to reach out to my alma mater and be like, hey, y'all, I got some pieces for y'all to hang. Like,
Yeah.
so you can switch it out, you know?
And it may just take that, you know, some of the alums that are artists and do have an interest to kind of come back and interject that. It could take, you know, just some alums coming back and interjecting some of that, you know, interest back into the arts.
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think so. And I think with like people like Amy Sherrill, who is, you know, a graduate of Clark, and she recently did Michelle Obama's portrait for, you know, like people like her that are just so, like, she's really reached this level of influence right now, and we get to experience her in her prime. But she's going to set a tone that we've kind of been missing for a while in regards to Black artists and just being nationally recognized. And I hope that it ignites that fire. At the same time, a lot of creatives, though, like you're saying, don't even think the education aspect is necessary. Like, and that's what kind of concerns me too, because one of the things that constantly fuels me is knowing my history. So, you know, Maya Angelou said it. She was like, art is only supposed to, I know I'm not saying this perfectly, but she's saying like, art's only purpose is to be an explanation of your current time. Like, so that's what art is supposed to do. People should be able to experience your work and get what you were coming from. And if we don't have that mindset moving forward, if we're not educating ourselves, you know, just fully indulging ourselves in the history of Black art and different artists and different styles and, you know, where they're even coming from and, you know, how do we expect that legacy to continue? Because it's already hard to hold on to. So, girl, you dropped a gem on me today. Hey, I have to put this on my to-do list to contact Bethune Cookman.
Yeah.
So I can give them some painting.
And I'm sure they will be, you know, more than happy, you know, to hear from you and receive something, because just coming from, I've done a lot of stuff with my alumni association. It's really just a matter of alumni reaching out. And I know we see it the other way around. Like, they should be reaching out to me. But as we all know, our staff at HBCUs, they're you know, distributed in different ways. Certain areas have more people, certain ones don't. Alumni relations typically just doesn't have that many people. So it's easier for us to keep in contact with them than it is for them to keep in contact with us sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
so
that is so true.
And also, you know, with you being younger or just younger alumni anyway, we have ideas that probably have never crossed their minds. And so sometimes you just have to serve that back up, and they're like, yeah, okay, well, why don't you head it? Do you mind doing this? And it just kind of gets the ball rolling.
Yeah, I totally agree. And shout out to all the people that are part of these young alumni associations that's like really putting forth that effort to bridge that gap, you know, in between. Because I know for the MEAC SWAC game this year, Cookman's playing in it. And Cookman alum, when I tell you, this is all we talking about. This is our classic this year. Like, everybody's like, y'all, we're going to be at the MEAC SWAC game. Like, people are like, you know, like, we're just so hype about it. And, like, the Alumni Association has created, you know, a full-out weekend as if it's homecoming, like, for that week. And we're doing community service and, you know, different mingling. And it's just, I'm excited about it. Like, I'm excited to just be back in that essence, back in that presence. And I think you're right. Like, all it takes is a call. All it takes is us reaching out.
So speaking of classics, speaking of the MEAC SWAC, just back into HBCUs, let's talk about some of your HBCU memories. What are some of your favorite memories from your undergraduate life or as an alum at your HBCU?
So undergraduate, hands down, I will never forget the night President Obama won. I was actually living off campus. This was my first year living off campus. And it was my best friend at the time, our two boyfriends. We was watching it at the house. and everyone from student government was in a Facebook group, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, she's gonna win!" Da 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 da. Like, you know. And my best friend was like, "We got to go to campus. Like, we got to go on campus right now." You know. And I don't know if you remember, but at the time, CNN and then were showing like all these HBCUs celebrating when they found out. So we drive back to campus, and Cookman was beyond lit. Like, the Ave where you drive through was packed. Like, it was so packed. You hit the quad. Everybody was out there singing. We was dancing. We were celebrating. Cookman's like, we have this. Cookman is the perfect balance of excellence and ratchetness when it's necessary. And it's just like the ideal balance. Like, it balances out perfectly. And Jeezy dropped that "My President is Black," and you would have thought that that was like the school song, because it was so loud being played on the quad, all the Greeks had their trees. It was just, I mean, like, I remember, like, you know, we had a fountain, people jumped in the fountain, they got in trouble for jumping in the fountain, but the amount of people that were out there, it just felt so good. And, you know, I remember some of us was crying, like, we felt like we were so a part of history that night. Like, that high was like a different type of euphoria, like, you know, and to be around all these young Black kids, like, we're all young, like, really being inspired, like, wow, like, we got our first Black president, and he was just here a month ago talking to us. Like, it was such a crazy experience. Like, hands down, that was one of my favorite all-time HBCU experiences.
You pledged, though, while you were there, no?
Yeah, I did. I pledged in 2010.
And you're a member of?
I'm a Delta. I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta. Sorority Incorporated, all that jazz. And I did, and it was fun. I definitely enjoyed it. I've gained some of the best friendships of my life from it. This might step on toes too, because I'm also one of those people who have pledged, and I appreciate the organizations for what they are to our, you know, our history and what those. But I'm also one of those people who I would never denounce my letters. But I think the older I've got, you know, I don't want to be a part of anything that makes it seem like I separate myself from other Black people, because I think that that's an issue that we have amongst ourselves. And I also think that because of how much organizations have grown on the business standpoint and internationally, we don't do the same things that when you're learning about your organization, they were doing at the time. But I have nothing but respect and love for all of them. Being Greek during that experience was phenomenal. I mean, we had literally so much fun. I have my line. There's 28 of us in total. And we were like, we were in highly anticipated line. Me and my line sisters, those first couple months, I probably did think I was Beyonce. Like, I'm just being honest with you. I probably did think I was hands down Beyonce. I remember we went to Fifth, and that was I've never experienced, always been around Black people. I've never experienced going to an HBCU and going to, like, I don't know what Atlanta Greek Picnic is like now, but going to, like, things like that and Fifth and stuff like that. You really are in a different world.
Oh, yeah.
And I think those experiences are so necessary for African Americans during that time of growing in adulthood, so you can feel a sense of comfort in who you are before you step out into this world and realize how cruel it can be to you because of things that are out of your control. But it's okay for you to own it, and it's okay. And another thing about, like, those experiences is it teaches you how different we all are. Like, there's so many different types of, you know, African Americans and Black people. So I would say, like, the most blissful, though, was President Obama winning. And then even as an alum, I went back for homecoming in 2013, I think. And it was one of my chapter's anniversaries.
Oh, nice.
And seeing the woman who actually wrote my letter and everything for Delta, she used to be my choir director as a kid. She's DA. My chapter is Delta Alpha. I'm DA 2010. She's DA 1969.
Oh, wow.
And yes, and we had like a big old luncheon, and they did something really sweet where a soror from a certain year had to say something nice about a soror from, like, you know, it had to have a huge gap, and, you know, just the things she said, and it's just crazy, those connections. Like, they're really unexplainable. Like, it's such a family vibe. But that, going back as an alum, and even though I wasn't even that far removed, like, you just see, like, the new faces, and you see how much they love in life, and it's like you get to go back and relive how you were a few years ago in this, like, Black utopia for a little bit.
Right.
It's all necessary. It's definitely necessary.
Yeah, for sure. Like Claflin, same small family vibe. So I totally get it. And it's some of the other schools, people are like, you graduated with me, you were my classmate. Like, we know everybody. And we know
we know
all classes, freshman, sophomore, junior. We know you all.
We know you all. It's so crazy because I have, like, kids from Bethune Cookman, like, in their bio, it'd be like Bethune Cookman 22. Why are you following me? Why? How did we come across each other? But I'm happy that you are, because we're all Mary's babies. So, you know, that's just how it is. It's like, you know, everyone. And then my guy, he went to FAM. He's a graduate of FAM.
Okay.
And it's a little different, you know, it's totally different from him. And he says it all the time. He's like, wow, they're so large. And he's like, anytime you throw something, Cookman comes out as if you all were like best friends. I was like, it's not that. It's just that we were so much smaller that I could walk down the quad and literally like, hey, Tasha, hey, Roxy, hey, so-and-so, hey, so, like, really know people's names. Like, as for y'all, you're probably walking past different people every day because you have over like 11,000 students.
Right. Yeah. They feel like bigger is better always. And, you know, I'm just saying, we just have
you don't even have to say much. I get it.
Thanks for sharing those memories. But let's talk, just to wrap it up, about Bethune Cookman and giving back to Bethune Cookman and what exactly that looks like for you.
So in regards to giving back to Bethune Cookman, Bethune sends out a letter every year, you know, with the story of Dr. Bethune saying, hey, you're an alum, at least give $1.50, because that's what Mary McLeod Bethune started the institution with. I do donate to my alumni association. Right now, my current line is in the process of creating a scholarship for just Bethune Cookman students that have nothing to do with the chapter itself. I would like to open up a full gallery on Cookman's campus prior to me opening up my own personal gallery. Mm-hmm. That's one thing. Right now, Cookman, like a few other HBCUs, we're having a little in-house problems. I think sometimes with an alum, you're a little hesitant about when you give your money, depending on, you know, your president and things like that. Like, we were in the news a couple years ago about the Betsy DeVos, her being the commencement speaker. And, you know, the alumni, the students were definitely not on the same track as the administration and everything, the trustees. So we kind of separated ourselves a little bit. Like, we're never not going to claim being Mary's babies. But, you know, the alumni were doing their thing, and the school was kind of doing its thing. But now we're at a point of, we all understand that we need to be on the same page to really get the development of the school out there. Mm-hmm. And, you know, even as an alum, like, that's the type of situation that when you hear about it, you're like, wow, if I was doing more than I'm doing, then I would have known ahead of time, and I would have more of a say-so in it. Like, because I know, just being on the student government side of it, like, when things will happen and you're in the school and then all the alum are upset about it, but it's like, where are you guys? Like, where are you guys in helping us and stuff like that? And, you know, that's one thing that, in my household especially, you know, generational wealth is huge, and investing is huge, and cutting these other expenses so we can give back to what we really care about, so we can give back to Cookman, we can give back to Sam. I even want to give back to Edward Waters because it's just in my hometown.
Mm-hmm.
And so right now, I just pay my small alumni fees. I'm definitely going to send them some art going. And I know for the MEAC SWAC, we're doing a charity walk. I know we're doing a community service event. I know for a fact we have like 3 service events, and then we have like a couple mingling events. And that's about it on my standpoint for now. But in everything that I do, like, my intentions is, if I'm not giving back monetarily, then I hope that I'm giving back the inspiration and the motivation to one of my fellow Wildcats or to a current Wildcat to do what they need to do to chase their dreams, or if they feel the need to reach out and they need something. If there's any Wildcats that are artists and they need anything, like, they know the ones that I do speak to, they can reach out to me for anything. I'll send it to you. I'll get it to you, because it's so important for us to speak to them directly and try to instill in who's currently on hands at the school. We know what it's like being student leaders, wanting to take charge. And then now I know what it's like sitting on the outside and watching it all happen. And I think now I'm just like kind of figuring out what my place is as an alum. Because I think every alum goes through like 2 years of like, I'm paying them every month.
Right.
And then it's like you realize, like, no, that's the only real reason why these mega schools can prosper so well.
That's true.
Because they have these huge alumni bases. They don't have any issue with giving away all of this money. And we need to be the same way, just like the brother in Morehouse. Their commencement speaker who paid back. That's the goal. Right. I would love to go back to Cookman and speak to a graduating class and be able to cover all their student loans, because you're really setting them up for success. Like, these are the type of monumental steps we need to make in regards to our HBCUs, so we can keep them alive, keep them thriving, and keep them competitive in the school market.
Absolutely. Well, you're already doing your part. Of course, I always tell people, always just mentioning that that's your alma mater. It goes a long way. Because sometimes with our HBCUs, people haven't heard of them. And just you saying, this is where I went to school, this is why I'm successful, or this experience at this university is what contributed to my success. And that is so helpful. And I mean, you said you're paying your little alumni dues, but you're sending something, so that is important as well. And then, of course, everything that you just offered to do, like, if anyone needs help, that's really what it's all about. So I'm glad that's what giving back to Bethune Cookman looks like for you, Cris.
All right. Thank you so much. This episode has been probably my favorite podcast interview.
Oh,
like,
thanks.
Hands down, because it really touched on everything that I care about. Like, my alma mater, our community, and art, and just really like what are we doing for what's next and for who's next. Because I think that's just like something we have to constantly keep in our mind. Like, I love what you guys are doing at the HBCU podcast. And I don't think you guys realize how many lives you're touching on the alumni base and on the current student base, because they need to see us shine. And you guys are giving that platform to give them that motivation to do it.
Well, thank you. And again, I just appreciate people taking their time out to be on the podcast to share their HBCU experience and tell their story. So thank you for all those kind words, and even taking your time out to be here with us.
Still, anytime. And they'll be hearing from the HBCU podcast and Artpocalypse very soon.
Yeah, so if you could encourage a student to choose an HBCU, it could be any HBCU or it could be Bethune Cookman University, what would you say?
It's always going to be Bethune Cookman University. Always. I would say, if you want to understand the sense of your history, if you want to feel the importance that is enriched in you, then you need to walk the campus of Bethune Cookman University. You need to sit in those classrooms. But I'll say it in regards to all HBCUs, because they all have purpose. I tell people all the time, like, people have this PWI HBCU debate. It's not even a debate for me. Mm-hmm. It's something that I know And I know that young African Americans, you need that experience and that confidence and that moment in that growing stage of your life that makes you feel comfortable with being fully Black. And you're only going to get it in that environment, because there hasn't been any other time outside of that. Living in Jacksonville, being in a predominantly Black neighborhood, living in Atlanta, being in a predominantly Black city. Mm-hmm. Like, Atlanta's one of the only huge metropolitan cities that are majority Black. You know, it's still not the same safe space as I felt as from when I was at Cookman. And I'm grateful for it, because it gave my mind that time to nurture itself, but also be comfortable in itself and feeling like, hey, it's okay for you to even think like that, because that's your truth. So always Bethune Cookman, hell Wildcats, always, always. But I mean, they can go other places too if they have to.
I love it. That's the right answer. Every time you come on here, they're all important, but you really got to do your part for the admission staff. But what is coming up from you that we should be on the lookout for?
So if you're in the Atlanta area, or if you frequently visit Atlanta, August 23rd, I will be curating the Artpocalypse Top 8 Visual Artist Show. I think you should definitely make your way to that. That will be at the Museum of Modern Perspective from 7 to 11. The first hour is 6 to 7, but that's a closed hour. You should definitely make your way out there. If you're currently in Atlanta, I do have artwork hanging at the OPE Gallery in downtown Atlanta to the end of July. I have some artwork currently hanging at the God is Dope Mansion. I have like 3 pieces hanging there. They've been hanging there for a while. I get a lot of good love back on those. I have a couple pieces hanging at the W in Buckhead. So go check that out. And that's what I have coming up currently. If you're going to be at Art Basel in December, please contact me. I'm Cris Laniese, or at Artpocalypse Atlanta. I'll be down there the entire week, showcasing my own work, exhibiting other artists' work, mingling, doing things of that sort. Oh, and how can I forget? In September, we're throwing our first Comic-Con all-anime, urban anime art show for Comic-Con this year.
Dope.
So this is going to be really, really dope, because it's all urban anime, which is this is like an underground category of art that's like really about to blow up, and everyone knows it's about to blow up, but there are so many dope artists in it, and we're just doing a strict show towards it. I don't really do urban anime, but I know a lot of dope urban anime artists, and if you're into anime, which a lot of us are, this is something that you want to follow us on. So please follow the team, Artpocalypse Atlanta, and follow myself, Cris Laniese. That's Cris without an H. And everything you need to know will be on those sites.
Okay, so if you guys missed anything, don't worry, because you'll be able to find all the links and the social channels that Cris just shared in our episode description, as well as at the HBCUpodcast.com. So if you missed anything, don't worry. I'll put all the links there so that you can make sure you get to the show on the 23rd. You can make sure you get to the show in September. You may also be able to find all of the places her art is hanging, so you can go and take a picture and tag her and buy it, or however that works.
Yay! Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you so much for listening to the HBCU podcast. We have so much more HBCU content on the way, so make sure you subscribe to the podcast, rate the podcast, and visit us at thehbcupodcast.com. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at the HBCU Podcast. Like us on Facebook. We love you for listening. Until next time.